Well, there was an interesting discussion at dinner about what is the strangest miracle that Jesus performed. And I heard somebody say, turning water into wine. They thought that was strange. One person said, telling Peter to go and catch a fish with a coin in his mouth to pay the taxes. What was the other one that was mentioned? I can't remember.
Spitting in the dirt.
Oh, spitting in the dirt in order to heal someone. So I mean, if you're not familiar with the stories, you got to picture, like, what is it to read that story the first time? Like, what is going on here? What is Jesus doing? We are going to see that you cannot put Jesus in a box. And it is so wonderful to realize that Jesus can go beyond our imagination, go beyond what we can conceive. We're going to see that in what I think is the strangest miracle that Jesus performed. And the reason I call it the strangest one is because the miracles of Jesus, like for example, last week we studied the feeding of the 5,000, where Jesus took a few loaves of bread and fish and multiplied them, more than 5,000, those were the men. There was many more people than that. And that was so incredible that Jesus was able to do something beyond what would happen in the natural realm. He created and multiplied food. I can understand that because Jesus had compassion on the crowds. When he healed people, he had compassion on them. The miracles of Jesus are really based in his compassion for people. I think the one today also is compassion, but it's a little bit strange. Maybe you don't think it's strange. Well, let me tell you the story. You tell me if it's strange. Okay? We're continuing the story. It's right after the feeding of the 5,000, and this is how the story goes. Immediately, Jesus made his disciples get into a boat and go on ahead of him to Bethsaida. And, while he dismissed the crowd. After leaving them, he went up on the mountainside to pray. When evening came, the boat was in the middle of the lake, while Jesus was alone on the land. He saw them, straining at the oars because the wind was against them. About the fourth watch of the night, he went out to them walking on the lake. Wow, yes, walking on the lake. And he was about to pass them by. But when they saw him walking on the lake, they thought he was a ghost. They cried out because they all saw him and they were terrified. Immediately, Jesus spoke to them and said, "Take courage. It is I. Don't be afraid." Then he got into the boat, and immediately the wind died down. They were completely amazed because they had not understood about the loaves. Their hearts were hardened. Okay, that's the story. Jesus walking on the water. I don't know if you think that's a little strange. But let's unpack this thing, because I think when we'll see the mercy of God in us, we'll see the kindness of God, it's going to encourage us greatly. So let's understand the first part of the story is that we see again, I'm just going to remind you about it, the pattern in Jesus' life is engagement and then withdrawal. Serving people and then getting time alone with the Father. This is the rhythm that we're seeing of Jesus' life. Now, the last time we saw it, Jesus said to his disciples after they came back from being sent out on their mission, he said, let's go away by ourselves and be alone. Let's go to a quiet place. So there's sometimes when being alone is with other people, where you're no longer serving, but you're fellowshipping with them, you're catching up, you're praying together. We need that. But in this particular instance, we see that Jesus decides he doesn't want to be together with his disciples. He wants to be completely alone. And there are times where we need silence in our life. There are times when we just need to separate ourselves from everybody, be alone with God, and pray. And Jesus was not doing a 5-minute prayer meeting here. I mean, this is from the evening until 3 a.m. in the morning, because that's the fourth watch of the night when he finally goes out to them. So we need times of extended time alone with God. That's what I'm hearing from Ryan in terms of the way he's living. He gets time with God, and that's where he's getting his joy. But, Jesus felt this need. So brothers and sisters, if Jesus needed to pray and needed to find time alone with God, how much more we, in following his example, that are not as closely connected to the Lord as he was, that we need this in our lives. So that's the first thing we should see, the necessity of time alone with God, to be refueled, to ask, inquire of God, make sure, to be reconfirmed in his will, to get direction for the future, to have our hearts poured out. Jesus did that. The second thing we want to notice, it's very interesting what words are used. Immediately, it says, he made the disciples get into the boat. I wonder why he used the word made them. It's not like he was forcing them, but I think maybe there was some resistance or some questioning or something. I like the fact that there are times where God uses, I heard someone say today in Psalm 23, he makes me lie down in green pastures. There are some times where the forceful, loving pressure of God is to set us in a direction that we normally wouldn't go. Now, why would these disciples not necessarily want to get into the boat? Well, if you remember, that maybe they didn't want to be separated from Jesus. Maybe, again, they were so tired from ministering all day because they hadn't had a break. And the idea of getting into the boat and rowing to the other side about maybe 6 miles did not sound very appealing. Maybe they would have liked to say, hey, can we take a break? But Jesus said, this is the plan. You go to the other side of the lake. I will meet you later. So he made them go ahead. This means Jesus was very clear in his will that they were to go on ahead of him to the other side of the lake. Now, this should have reminded them of something. We read earlier in Mark when Jesus said to them, let's go to the other side of the lake. And Jesus made it very clear. And then they could have remembered what happened. The last time Jesus said, let's go to the other side of the lake. But this time he's telling them to go by themselves. Now, I want you to notice that they encounter severe resistance while they are doing the will of God. It's God who said to them, go to the other side of the lake. And there they are, stuck in the middle of the lake. They've been rowing for hours. It's the fourth watch of the night. It said when evening came, they were in the middle of the lake. They'd been out there for a while rowing, and they were not making much progress. And so, brothers and sisters, we must not think in our lives that we determine whether we're in God's will or not by how easy it is or whether or not we're facing resistances. That is not the standard. If Jesus has told us to do something, there are many times we are going to face resistances and challenges and struggles. And this type of resistance, I think here, is very similar to the last time they encountered a storm on the lake, which was this. You remember why they encountered that storm on the lake last time? It's because they were going to the other side to minister to a demoniac, to a man full of demons, and it seemed like there was resistance coming from the demonic forces to keep them from being able to accomplish that mission. And so the fact that they're getting this resistance, maybe they could have become aware, wait, this resistance, even though we're doing God's will, we're receiving spiritual resistance. The wind is just a picture. The darkness is a picture. We're entering into this spiritual battle that's going on here. Now, what do you do when you're in the midst of a battle like that, where you're just so tired? What can come to your mind? What temptations can you face? Well, I asked a few brothers here to help me to just imagine. It's not in the Bible what went through the disciples' minds, but I want us to picture it. So I'm going to invite those guys who are going to be part of our little skit here to come on up. Come on up. Come on the stage here. Okay, these are the apostles. I'm John. In the boat. This is the, so kind of. Why don't you get on the ground and you face like this, face there, like you're going to be rowing, okay? And now don't be don't look happy.
Need some help.
Don't look happy because this, like, you guys are like beat. I don't know. I should have asked him to do this one. I don't know if he can stop smiling. Okay. All right. Now speak out loudly so they can hear you. But yeah, that's right. We're rowing, and maybe even going side to side because Matthew tells us there's a lot of waves. Okay, Andrew, get us started here.
Guys, I'm so tired. Must have been rowing for 6 hours. My arms are aching.
Mine too.
Mine too. The wind has been torturing us. How about we just turn around and let the wind carry us back to the shore? No sense fighting this wind.
Hey, Jesus told us to go to the other side. We need to do what he said.
But I'm sure he will understand. Surely he doesn't expect us to keep going. This is just too hard.
Don't you remember the last time we were in this situation like this? Jesus helped us.
Come on, yeah. But he's not here to help us this time. He left us alone. I don't think it's fair. He tells us to row across the lake while he stays on the peaceful shore. If he had wanted to help us, he would have been in the boat with us. We are all on our own this time.
Maybe you're right. This is really bad. I am sure we are going to make it to the other side. I'm not sure that we are. And he doesn't even know what we are going through.
I really wish Jesus was here.
Ah, what's that?
It's a ghost!
It's a demon!
Thank you, guys.
Stealing my lines.
Did I steal your line?
I mean, let's get real, right? I mean, there could have been temptations that came to their mind to quit, to give up, to question why it was so hard for them, question whether God really cared about them, why Jesus had sent them off by themselves. Listen, there are these moments when we are serving God where we will not sense his presence. We may feel like, hey, I'm serving God, but why is God not helping me? Why is he not showing up when I need him? And we have to face this, and we have to realize that these storms are meant to test our faith, and they are meant to develop our character, and they are meant to deepen in us the lessons that God is trying to teach us. And if we will gain hold of that, we can keep growing and keep going, even though it's so difficult. Listen, sometimes you're going to face resistances in obeying God when you're trying to show Jesus' love in your family. And for a long time you've been rowing, a long time you've been sharing, a long time you've been hoping that your family is going to change. And you have to keep going. Sometimes you're facing in a marriage situation where you are struggling to see your marriage change. You've been trying for so long to see a different type of relationship, and it doesn't seem to be happening. You need to keep rowing. You need to keep going. You need to come up against that resistance. You need to, when you're with a boss, that you're praying, oh God, change my boss. You're getting a lot of resistance at work, a lot of criticism, a lot of pressure, making your life difficult, and you're feeling this pressure, this resistance. You need to keep going. You're trying to get into a location. I remember this woman who felt really called to go to Nepal. She just had this vision. She felt like God told her, go to Nepal. She went, she applied for a visa, she didn't get a visa. She applied for a visa again, didn't get a visa. Applied for a visa, she kept getting denied for a visa. So what she did, she said, let me get as close to Nepal as possible. So she went to the very north part of India, and she set up like a little house there for taking care of orphans. And some of the orphans came from Nepal. And she had this little orphanage, and she raised these Nepali kids in the orphanage. And she was there for 18, 20 years in India with this orphanage. Some of those boys that she brought up became border guards in Nepal. And she no longer needed a visa. This is a true story. And she got into Nepal, and she started planting churches. She started a whole church planting movement in the southern part of Nepal. But there was resistance. She had to keep rowing. She had to keep going. Oh, brothers and sisters, we are going to face a lot of resistances when we are trying to do God's will. And, you know, this is hard because they were in the middle of the lake. They had been rowing for hours. You are going to face this in your life. The temptation to quit, to give up, to turn around. But if you know it's God's will, you must not give up. You must not change your mind. You must not turn around. You must not say, hey, why isn't Jesus with me in this? You know, it's amazing. Jesus saw what they were going through. He saw. Now, my question is, if he saw it, why didn't he go out earlier? Right? Why did he wait until 3 a.m. in the morning, which is the fourth watch of the night? Like, why didn't he come quicker? Isn't this the question of Martha? Lord, why didn't you come quicker? We often want God to do something more quickly when he's trying to work out something else in our life. And if we would find out what that is and submit to it, to say, all I know is he told me to go to the other side. All I know is I got to keep rowing. I don't know exactly why I'm stuck in the middle of the lake. I don't know why there's so much resistance. I only know he told me to keep going to the other side. We need to hold on to the Word of God in that way in our lives. You know, one of the tragedies right now in the United States among followers of Jesus is a lack of commitment to do God's will. There really is a loss of commitment in so many ways. I see it evidenced in a number of ways. You know, one of the things that, I hope, will this be judgmental? Help me, Lord. You can reprove me if it's judgmental, okay? But, you know, one of the things that I thought would happen after the pandemic is that people would just flood back into the churches because they were like, oh, we've been so missing fellowship. We want to join back together. You know that didn't happen. Yeah. You know that there was a great decrease in the number of people who said, oh, I can dispense with this. I don't really need that type of relationship in my life. I think we need to question whether we can live solo Christian lives without being committed to a fellowship. Well, Jesus saw them. Now, this is so important to realize in our life. Whatever difficulty we go through, whatever challenge we are going through, we may not sense God's presence, but be certain God sees you. Jesus saw that they were struggling. He saw the situation. He saw them in the middle of the lake. I don't know how that happened. I mean, look, they were 3 miles out, so he must have had some special ability and perception to be able to see what they were going through. But that is God. He can see us wherever we're at. This is one of the names for God. He sees me. He sees me. That is so precious. Well, eventually he does show up. You know, the Bible tells us in Hebrews 6:10, God is not unjust, that he overlooks your labor of love that you have done to the saints. God, you may not get rewarded by people. You may not be noticed. You may not be appreciated. You may not get affirmed. But be certain God is not unjust, that he will overlook your labor of love. And he himself will speak to you eventually the words that you need to hear. Well done, good and faithful servant. Enter into your master's joy and happiness. You will get to hear that if you persevere. Okay. Now notice also, when Jesus finally shows up and finally is coming to them, they don't recognize him. They say, it's a ghost. Because, you know, they remember the last time they were in the storm. And the last time in the storm, they realized, hey, this is demonic opposition. So they're expecting, if they see somebody coming toward them, it's probably a demon. Because the whole thing about chaos with the waves and the darkness, that would have been very common for understanding that is like a demonic type of situation. So here's the message. Jesus shows up in our life in unexpected ways. It would have been great if when they were rowing and they were saying, he's coming anytime. I know he's going to show up. Like he promised to help us. Remember last time he helped us? I don't know how he's going to do it this time, but let's look. Let's keep our eyes open. I'm sure Jesus is going to help us. I see, he's coming, just like I told you. No. It's a ghost. And they were terrified. Oh, brothers and sisters, don't put God in the box. You say, how is God going to help me in this situation? And you got your own little, or you think there's no way for him to help you in your situation. Get rid of that idea. God, I would say it would have been so great when Jesus Christ was resurrected. If they were all outside the tomb saying he's coming out any moment now. Hey guys, get ready. He said he's coming out on the third day. Let's welcome him when he comes out. That would have been much better. When we read these stories, we have to realize it didn't have to be this way. They did not have to react the way they did. You don't have to react the way you do if you learn to trust in Jesus. Because we realize when Jesus finally gets into the boat, well, by the way, when did the storm stop? When he got into the boat. And so when he says to them, take courage, it is I, don't be afraid, the wind and the waves are still going. So he didn't calm the storm and then say, hey, don't be afraid, it's going to be okay. In the midst of the storm, he's speaking this powerful message. I am here. In fact, unfortunately, the English translation does not do this story very much justice, because the exact words that Jesus uses here, those of you who like to study the Greek, go ahead and do it. Because really what he says, take courage, I am. I am. Meaning, this story is evoking Old Testament images where it says God is the one who walks on the water. He's evoking the story of Moses, where Moses is encountering God and he says to Moses, I am who I am. This is Jesus revealing his divinity to them. And the fact is, how do you picture this story? Like, it's dark out. How did they see Jesus walking in the night? Now, I'm going to go a little bit beyond the Bible, but you got to imagine the story. He's up all night praying to his Father. And there's another story in the Bible when he went up on the mountainside and he was praying all night that he started glowing. He was reflecting the glory of God. There was a radiance of God around him. I imagine after spending time with God like that he was radiant. And so they could see a light coming to them on the water. And the reason I also say that is because this imagery, this is the other part that's strange about the story is he was about to pass them by, right? It's like, Jesus, are you saying, I'm going to get there ahead of you, You guys keep rowing. I gotta, I'll be able to get across to the other side. Is he doing that? No. In the story of Moses, when Moses says, I want to see your glory, and God puts him in the rock, and it says the glory of God passed by Moses. So I think this story is evoking the fact that Jesus, as the I Am, is revealing his glory going by them so they can see his glory in that way. Remember in the Old Testament, Elijah too, it said the Lord passed by the rock that they were in, that Elijah was in. I think this is just evoking for us some Old Testament imagery where when he says, I am, they would get it. This is God himself. The glory of God is being revealed to them on that water. Did they get it? Now, how do we know that they were not supposed to, cry out in terror? Why should they recognize Jesus? It says, Jesus got into the boat and they were completely amazed. Why? They were amazed because they had not understood the miracle of the loaves. So what were they supposed to understand in the miracle of the loaves? If they understood the miracle of the loaves, how would this story have been different? Anybody want to tell me? Tell us? But what is it that they were supposed to have learned in the multiplication of the loaves and fishes, that if they had that lesson down, this story would have been different? God always comes through. He provides. He meets us at our point of need. He's able to go beyond the natural realm.
His power is love.
His power and love. So, okay, if they believed, if they got that lesson from the loaves, how would the story have changed? Like, how would the story have been written differently?
They'd be praising God. All excited. Yes.
Anyone else?
Maybe no exhaustion from the rowing.
No.
Maybe ambition for the rowing.
Okay. They would have been energized in the rowing?
Yeah.
Yes? They wouldn't have had doubt? Yeah.
They
Yeah.
would have recognized him.
They would have recognized him. And they said, okay, man, he did something so amazing that in the miracle of the loaves, I'm sure he's going to do something here. Like, let's just keep our eyes open. Let's keep watching for what Jesus is going to do. I'm sure, we don't know when, but he's coming. He's not going to leave us alone.
You think they could have done that? Could have they told the storm to quiet? Because they had sinned. They had that authority, right? That happened some chapters before where Jesus sends them in pairs, right?
Oh,
Could they have been like, oh, well,
Calm the
Jesus
storm
gave us
himself.
that
Wow.
authority and he...
wow. Wow, that's an amazing thought to say, hey, remember last time he gave us authority to cast out demons? He also had authority over the wind. Maybe we can do that. Yeah, maybe they tried and it didn't work. Any other thoughts? How
A
this story...
conversation that reflects their hearts would have been different, I think.
I think so. Yeah. So, wow, this is so great. Anyone else want to share?
I don't think they would have been relying on their own understanding as much. Like, I think with like, the loaves and stuff that last week we talked about, like, asking a different question, like, in our own selves, instead of looking and asking ourselves, how can I solve this? Looking to God and being like, God, how do you want me to solve this? And I think they would have noticed Jesus quicker if they would have asked him instead of relying on their own understanding.
Oh, that's so good. That's right. Well, okay. I think one of the great challenges we face in our faith is when we see a miracle of blessing. And we're part of that miracle of blessing and provision. And there's so much joy in seeing how God has done something like multiplying the loaves. And when that blessing is followed by a hardship and a difficulty, and you're kind of like comparing the two things, that's the challenge. The challenge is, wait, where's the blessing of God in this? Wait, I just saw God do this other miracle right like that. Where's the miracle now? And we need to be able to receive the blessing of God, and we also need to persevere when things are difficult in doing God's will. I hope we, as a church, will be committed to following God's word no matter what. I hope we're going to give testimonies to one another to keep going, to keep rowing, even when it's dark out, even when it's the fourth watch of the night, even when you're tired. Let us keep going in following God. And he will show up. And he, even when you don't hear or know he's seeing you, know he sees you. He sees you in your struggle. He sees you in your perseverance. And he is not unjust to forget your labor of love. This is the compassion of Jesus Christ for his disciples. And the last thing is it says, their hearts were hardened. Oh, how distressing that must have been for Jesus to have realized, what does it mean their hearts were hardened? I mean, when they didn't understand the lesson, it meant something was happening in their heart, that they were no longer able to be open to what God was doing right then. A hard heart doesn't necessarily mean that you've totally rejected God. It just means you're no longer understanding and willing to receive what God was trying to tell you then. Let us not have hard hearts anymore.